Last week, we were at the IPMS USA National Convention in Madison, Wisconsin. And while we were there, Tim and I presented a seminar entitled 5 Lessons FineScale Modeler has learned in 42 years of publishing.
You sure it was entitled, or was it just titled? Be that as it may, without further ado, let's get to it.
Sure.
This is Aaron.
Hey, Aaron.
I'm Tim. And our seminar today is FineScale Modeler, five lessons that we've learned over the course of 42 years. Now,
Hobby knives are sharp.
Only 5?
Only 5. We only have time for 5. 5 lessons. Yeah, hobby knives are sharp. That's good. Glue sticks things together sometimes. So within this seminar, we have 5 different sections that we're going to talk about. And each section, it has a title that we came up with. The title of those sections, because we want some audience participation. So the titles of each of those sections are the titles to a song. Okay? And so as we announce the next section, we'll say the title of the song. The first person to tell us the band who did the song gets one of these. FineScale Modeler apron. We got 5 of them.
Wow.
Okay? So we'll see how this works. The Beatles, okay. You know what? That's a good plan. Just ride one band through the whole thing. You're gonna go with Iron Maiden every time? Is this a giveaway? All right. So we're gonna start things off here with The Song Remains the Same. Okay, it was over here. Who was that? Here you go, sir. See, it wasn't that hard. Thank you for your participation. Okay, what can we mean by that? We got chimes in the background. That's awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this off with a little bit of a reading some excerpts from the September-October issue of from 1984, and the editor's note by Bob Hayden, our founding editor. So we're going way back, like 2 years after the magazine was founded. If you pay attention to this, you might pick up what the theme is. In it, he wrote, in this issue, 2 of our new products columns include items about Japanese science fiction kits now arriving on our shores and in our hobby shops. Such models have been popular in Japan for several years, based on long-running animated cartoon programs, and the robot-like figures are neither robots nor figures, but gigantic, fortress-like mobile battle suits with humans inside. He goes on to wonder, may these models displace planes, cars, tanks, ships, and other traditional modeling subjects? Quote, I doubt this new subject matter will lure established modelers away from their main areas of interest. If scale modeling is to be a healthy, thriving hobby in years to come, the seeds of interest have to be planted somehow. If the bizarre, and we'll talk about this, if the bizarre subject matter lures new modelers away from video arcades and gives them a taste of what the hobby is all about, the odds are better that 5 or 10 years from now, they'll be building what we call, for the lack of a better word, serious subjects. This is 1984, folks. Okay? So, I want to just get this out there right now. There's a sort of hint of otherness to Bob's editorial there. There's the calling it bizarre, sort of calling out Japanese culture a little bit. And we want to make sure that everybody understands there's nothing more strange about Gundam models than there is about a Star Wars or Star Trek model. So they aren't bizarre, they aren't outlandish, even though maybe they haven't been particularly popular with our subset of the modeling market.
the health and growth of the hobby has always been a concern. Obviously, we all talk about, is it dying? Is it, that sort of thing. And that refrain of it withering away is so constant as to become almost like measuring microwaves in space, background noise.
And that's how we really feel. This is what we have learned. Since probably before 1984, there has been this constant sort of undercurrent of the hobby is dying, the hobby is going away, the hobby is this, the hobby is that. It's always this sort of, there's this worry that there's something wrong with it. And lo and behold, year after year after year, from at least 1984 to 2000 to 42 years later, at 2024, we're still here. The hobby's doing quite well, and we're moving along. Something else that you'll notice out of that editorial is that he brings up, we got to keep the kids out of video arcades. Okay, back then it was video arcades. Then it turns into computer games, and then it's console games, and then it's the internet, and oh man, it's always whatever that next thing is, right? That is distracting kids from being part of the hobby. Kids are going to be distracted from the hobby no matter what, whatever hobby it is, whether it's knitting or this or that. It is our job as hobbyists, as people who are enjoying this hobby, to bring those kids along. It's our job to make sure that it's passed on. It's not anybody else's job. And as I can tell you from personal experience, and I know there are other parents out there who I've talked to who do the same thing, that it's about taking that time and being with the kids. It's about going, you know what? Put the iPad or iPhone or whatever it is that you've got going on, put that down. Come hang out with dad. And we're going to do 3 hours at the workbench. You start that early, and suddenly you've got somebody who's involved. We just had, this just happened yesterday. There was a little girl who took Rob Schmidt's airbrushing seminar, right? It was kind of a lark, I think, if I understand the story correctly. And she goes in and she paints this dinosaur head, just out of the blue, and loved it. Loved it. Hadn't done it before. Her dad's obviously a modeler, but loved doing it. And her dad came over, and we had tagged unknowingly. We had tagged one of his models, and he brought it over. We got talking a little bit, and she was very excited. And we gave her a tag and said, "Fill this out. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a photo of that, and we're going to put it on the website. It might make the magazine." But that's how we continue to build. Her dad's being supportive, brings her to an event like this, shows her what it's about. And then it's our job too, to lean in and help build that person's self-esteem and get it going. Move on to the next one.
You can't always get what you want.
There you go.
So in issue 74, so this is 10 years or so after the magazine was founded, the magazine ran the first of the most wanted kit surveys. And we put it out there, asked people to return. And in issue 80, after 1,000 people had responded, remembering this is before the internet, so everyone had to mail the things in, so it took a little bit of time. They published the results. And that became an ongoing thing. We've done the most wanted kit survey several times. And one of the things you notice on the most wanted kit surveys, and I've gone through the lists before in like 3 of them for the things people wanted, is that there's a lot of things that come up where people want something and it doesn't get kitted and it doesn't get kitted. And people ask, why isn't this being done? Why is this kit that I want not being done? And that's sort of a constant thing that we see not only in the industry, but also in the magazine, is why is there not more of what I want to see in kits or in stories about building models? So
for us, excuse me, I have ice in my mouth, chomp that down. So in publishing, just like in other businesses, like the businesses that you guys are involved in, there's limited resources, right? Whether it's money, it's time, it's manpower, whatever. So we've got limited resources and space to do what we want to do with. Yeah, we would love to have 200 pages, right?
And so would you guys,
Every 2
right?
weeks, cramming this stuff out into a magazine. But you need staff. You need people to write those stories. Hint. You need to be able to cover the paper costs. There's all of these things, right, that go into this. So what we have to do with our content mix is to continually sort of tweak it and figure out, well, where is the hobby at right now? Where is it going to be in the future? And what can we do in the meantime to continue to serve not only the people who are ardent supporters of the title, who have been with us from the beginning for 42 years, or those people who are just getting on board now, right? How do we bridge that gap and how do we serve everyone?
For a long time, the focus of FSM stories tended to be more on like a particular subject. How do you build this version of the Panzer or this version of a Spitfire? Because a lot of times you had to convert something to get there. And so what was that about? And we did research data and those kind of things. Now we've really refined the focus to be about techniques and methods that you can use to make your models better, regardless of the subject matter. We use the subject matter as kind of the canvas to illustrate those techniques and those methods for different kinds of finishing, different kinds of building, different kinds of weathering, that kind of stuff.
And that's because the hobby has changed. We don't have to do as much, research necessarily and scratch building to get that particular tank that we want. Back in the day, it used to, you had one kind of tank and then you had to go in and you had to know what to do to make it into a different version of that tank or a different version of the plane. Now, companies listening to what you guys have been asking for over the last 40 years, they are now producing those models. You don't have to do that. They've got it practically out of the box. Now, not that you don't have to do research to accurize them and those sorts of things, but a lot of the heavy duty stuff. So the attitude of the whole hobby has changed to being more about what can we do to finish? What can we do to up our game on what does the final thing look like? Let's take this to a technique and skills-based sort of magazine rather than more of the history and more of the research side of things. The thing is that while it's hard sometimes to see that stuff go, the hobby changes. And so we have learned that we've got to change with it. Which sort of leads us into the next thing. Now this one's gonna be a tough one. You had 2 easy ones. Hopefully we've got a couple of metalheads in here, I don't know. How about March or Die? Any guesses?
The Beatles.
You know what, Danny, you get it because you tried. Motorhead.
Wow.
You don't get another one though, okay?
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome. All right. So this is kind of a grim sounding title, right? March or Die, but it doesn't need to be. So in April of 2002, then editor Terry Thompson wrote an editorial in support of a feature story on page 42 of that issue. Do you have any guesses as to what it might have been about? Think back to section 1.
The Beatles.
Gundam. So we bring this up partly as a refrain because of earlier, the song remains the same, but also despite Terry's glowing editorial about Gundam models, about the whole movement. And this is 2002 now, right? So the first one was in 84. We're talking 2002. 18, we'll say 20 years later. Because he got predominantly negative responses from readership about this single article. People were unhappy about it being in the magazine. So guess what? Gundam doesn't appear again in the magazine because of negative responses. So one of the things that Aaron and I determined when we became sort of the captains of this ship was that we were going to continue to look at where the hobby was. What are the trends? What do we see happening? What do we see? Where do we see things going? We talk to our industry contacts a lot, right? We are constantly pinging them, seeing what do they think? Where are they going? What are the things that they're doing? And a lot of times we can't talk about it, right? Because it's embargoed information. But it's like we're always there looking. And this isn't sour grapes, because we're going to talk about it a little bit later in another section. But I just want to, do a little bit of an imagination, if you will. Had we, as FSM, been on board in 1984 with the whole Gundam thing and went, you know what, we're going to really lean into this. We're here for this. We're going to help it along. Had we done that in 2002, we wouldn't be surprised that there's this whole thing out there. We wouldn't be surprised that these models would be at contests or trying to be brought into contests, trying to be brought into the IPMS National Convention. We wouldn't be surprised about them at all. They'd just be another portion of the hobby, and that's it. So we could have been there the entire time. Now, we'll get back to that toward the end, but
as we've said many times in videos, editorials, and maybe in seminars, if you guys were at last year's seminar, I'm sure we mentioned it then, change is inevitable. It's been a part of the hobby. We just touched on it a little while ago. Subject matter changes, techniques change, all of that changes. And rather than fight it, we need to engage with it and grapple with it, because failure to do so, standing still, is just going to put us all in the dustbin. The magazine, the hobby in general, everything.
And we own the fact that we haven't always, Aaron and I, we own the fact that the magazine hasn't always been very good at anticipating change, nor has it been good at necessarily promoting change to its readership. So this is one of those things that we're working on. And to a certain degree, we feel the pain because there are readers out there who don't want to see that change. And our job really is to try and make it, like I said earlier, so that we straddle this and make change as painless as possible, but we have to do it, right? Otherwise, the magazine, the hobby, we all have to accept that things are going to change. Not accepting change is status quo, and then where do we end up? We've seen other brands in publishing, right? If you look at publishing has been a rough space here for a couple of decades now. That doesn't mean that you can't have magazines and brands that are successful, but you've got to really try. You have to have your hand on the tiller. And we have watched brands in other industries. There are magazines from our former executive editor, who's a real big car guy, and he's watched a lot of the car, brands fold, the car magazines fold, 1-to-1 scale car magazines go away. We've watched other modeling magazines go away. We watched music magazines go away, right? I mean, the point is that it doesn't have to be that way, but a lot of it stems from not future-proofing your brand and recognizing where your industry or your hobby is headed. I think you can do the next one.
All right, so this is going to be more of a gimme after the last one. Don't fear the reaper.
Who was that? All right. You? No. Oh, oh my God. Yep. All right.
So this goes hand in hand with the previous lesson and goes for everyone in the industry. If you're going to be bold, if you're going to embrace change, you can't fear the proverbial sword of Damocles. You can't fear the future. There's a difference between willful obstinance and calculated risks. And of course, there's a bit of reading the tea leaves in all of this. But you can't fear what may come even with established subjects. For example, we had a reader who dropped their subscription because FSM was no longer and I'm going to read this because it's, you know, I don't want to get it wrong, was no longer, in his opinion, exclusively aircraft, which we never were. If anyone goes back to the first issue of the magazine, there were aircraft, there was armor, there was a car, there was a tugboat. Bob Hayden ended up, and this is a funny story, so I'm going to relay this really quickly. He ended up on the eve of going to press with a page open in the magazine. So he went home and built an HO scale tugboat. He was a model railroader, so he had one of those around, and put that into the magazine. So we've covered everything from the get-go. He was angry about the inclusion of airbrushing, weathering, a discussion of mud, and the last straw was Jeff Polizzotto's amazing Star Wars Rogue One Star Destroyer collision diorama that was on the cover of the January 2022 issue. Which, if anyone remembers, that was a phenomenal piece of modeling, regardless of what your interest is.
It was brilliant. And that's a big point right there, right? Is that when we go back and talk about what it is that we said earlier, skills and techniques based, there's tons in that sci-fi story that you can lift and you can take it and do another diorama with. You can tweak it and modify it to your own ends.
You may not be ballsy enough to cut up a $120 kit to destroy it with another one you're going to destroy, but yes.
Another former subscriber dropped their subscription because we went to 60 pages. Okay, it happens. We had to recalibrate our editorial mix, and we talked about this in the seminar last year. For the print magazine, it was a must. We had to do it. There was no discussion. There was no, we do this or we do that. We had to recalibrate, and the best and easiest way for us to do that was to excise those things that could make nice web exclusives, put them on the web, and then continue to keep the meat and potatoes, as we would talk about it in the office, the meat and potatoes, the how-to in the magazine, because that has always been the center point for the publication. So we had to do that, but this was too much for him. And this just goes to, again, we had to do certain things to tweak that content mix, right? It was a must. It was the same thing that we had to do when we swallowed the content from Scale Auto, okay? As the last editor of Scale Auto, I was extremely sad to see that magazine go. But there was a lot of behind the scenes talking about what would we do with that content? How could we, what's the possibilities with it? And we went back to, hey, cars were always in FineScale until Cullenbach bought Scale Auto. That's when it was a publisher's decision to excise, for the most part, cars out of FSM because we didn't want to cannibalize the audiences, right? So we did these things. Well, when we moved back and we put cars into FSM, we knew that we were going to lose a lot of people from the Scale Auto side, and no matter what we did. And we knew that it was going to be troubling for a lot of FineScale Modeler readers who had gotten used to it being aircraft.
Right.
So, but you can't, sometimes in business, you just have to do what is needed.
And when you're faced with challenges like this, you have to move forward with the best plans you can, and you want to bring along all of your existing readers, subscribers, while looking for new audiences, because if we want the hobby to grow, if we want the magazine to grow, we need to make sure that we've got newer modelers coming along with us. That means forging those relationships with the new audiences and growing. And some of those things are going to upset people. It's just inevitable.
But it's our job to try and make it so that you guys come along for the ride.
Right.
Because we're here, yeah, we're getting paid, but it's because it's our job. There's a larger mission at hand. At the end. At the end. There's a larger mission at hand, and that is support of the hobby. So we're coming to the final section then. Wasted years.
Belly. Skip it off. No. I was going to say.
You were going to say that you already have yours. All right. So I talked earlier a little bit about what if we could have in 1984, right, leaned into the Gundam thing, or what if we had done it in 2002. And the thing is that we just hindsight is 20/20, right? So us looking back constantly and going, well, we could have done this. We should have done this. Why didn't we do this? God, this editor missed that. This publisher missed that. There's no good in continually looking back in that way. We have to learn from what we've done, what we've seen. That's the point of this whole talk. Don't waste your time always looking for those wasted years. And this is the essence of the attitude that we have now with FSM, right? The hobby is vibrant. Just ask Aaron.
Yes,
He'll
I
tell
think
you
so.
that it
I think
is.
it's a golden age of modeling. I mean, look at go to the vendor room. Look at all the stuff that's available to us that we could have only dreamed about 42 years ago when the magazine was founded. I mean, there's so many kits out there of obscure subjects that.
And that's in large part because of you guys.
Yep. Yeah.
Because you're out there going, well, we want to see this. We want to see that. You're also buying stuff. If it wasn't making money, they wouldn't do it.
So thank you for letting Dora Wings do Volti Vengeances. That's all I'm going to say.
But we can't forget, ultimately, where we come from. Even though we have to change and we have to do all these things, ultimately, as we said before, it's to support you guys. It is to make it possible for modelers to enjoy their hobby to the fullest. That's what we're here for, right? And that's why we turn to modelers as contributors. That's why we're constantly talking to you guys, because many of you have been with the magazine this whole time. And there is, from the way that we look at it, if somebody comes in and says, you know what, the magazine is too intermediary. It's not servicing my needs anymore. I'm beyond what you guys are showing us. Okay, you've graduated from FSM. Good.
Now become part of the faculty.
Turn around and help us contribute back. We'll pay you for it. Write stories for the magazine. We're not going to take all of them. We can't possibly do it. But submit, because there's a very good chance that you might end up in the pages of FSM. It's about promoting the hobby. And we aren't always going to be here. So we have to be looking at who's next, who's coming up. So just like in the hobby in general, with you guys, it's like, yeah, share it with your sons or your nieces or your nephews or somebody, which is what BAM is all about. Share it with somebody who hasn't been in the hobby. We have to be looking for who's going to become the next senior editor at FSM, who's going to be the next associate editors, who are going to be the next editors at FSM.
So Tim mentions BAM. Does anyone know what BAM stands for? Does everyone in this room know what BAM is?
Build a boss.
Okay.
Scott Gladstein, everyone.
Does everyone know what it is? Did we know?
So Build a Model Month is something that we started 2 years ago. This year is going to be the third one. And the idea behind it is this. We want this celebration of modeling to take off, to become our Men's Health Month, Women's Health Month, whatever month that you see that is on the calendar, that's what we want it to be. For the entire hobby. We want the entire hobby to be able to get together and celebrate it. Now, we launched that by coming up with this idea for a contest. Right? So we run this month-long contest, and we run a sweepstakes that goes along with it. It's judged And now we have sponsors for it. Last year, Tamia, Round 2, and Cult TV Man were involved. This year, if I miss somebody, let me know. I think we have Grex right now. We have Tamia. We have Aves and ICM, plus possibly more. They're coming in to sponsor it. Plus, we have people that are donating to the sweepstakes. Last year's sweepstakes was almost $3,000 worth of product that went to one guy in Ohio. So Santa Claus visited him early.
His spouse may no longer be speaking to him as we speak. But...
So anyway, that's what BAM is, and it's open to everybody. Last year, we allowed everybody to put in 3 models. The rules are out there. It's coming up. We are starting to rev up for it this year. So all of you all, please enter a model in, or 3. We'd love to see it because it's a celebration of what it is that you guys are doing. It's a celebration of the hobby. The other thing that we want to do with it is also encourage you to share your stories of sharing the hobby. Share those stories with us. Send me or Aaron emails. Send us pictures. Like, this is what I was doing. That story about the 12-year-old girl with Rob Schmidt, that's a perfect story. That's the kind of stuff that we want to continue to see. We want to hear about that because we want to be able to share that and help celebrate the hobby.
So to wrap up, Tim and I both firmly believe that print is essential. And so we are going to work our darndest to make FSM a print magazine for as long as they let us do it. We have a multifaceted brand with many avenues to reach existing and new audiences, and we have plenty of subjects to cover going forward with this thriving hobby. Understanding that the song remains the same.
You can't always get what you want.
March or die.
Don't fear the Reaper.
And don't waste your time always looking for those wasted years.
Thank you all for attending.